Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for St. Barnabas.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, rise on behalf of the great people of the constituency of St. Barnabas. Grateful to Almighty God for giving me the honor and the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to stand here on my feet today in this honorable place. And as I always say, to wake up in the greatest country in the world, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. Despite our challenges, Madam Speaker, before I get to this bill in its substance, Madam Speaker, as I stand here this evening, like so many others, I will do my best to speak as dispassionately, Madam Speaker, about a number of issues. And I trust that the sincerity of which is the source of my comments is seen, Madam Speaker, in how I deliver them. And I believe fundamentally that is always important because the Bahamian people are watching, and obviously they make judgments of what we say and how we say it on a daily basis, Madam Speaker. But I do feel this is particularly important, Madam Speaker, because of this issue of crime, this issue that has plagued many administrations in terms of the need to come up with comprehensive plans and policies, not only as it relates to enforcement, Madam Speaker, where even in public dialogue in some places, the focus has been, and though understandable, that the enforcement aspect is a very important aspect. But I do feel that for some time now, we have not sufficiently litigated this debate, this discussion on the crime issue, particularly as it relates to the preventative issues and fundamental issues, social issues, educational issues, national security issues, immigration issues, and otherwise that would influence or should influence our discussion about crime and its impact and its origins, Madam Speaker. And yes, Madam Speaker, the fact is that crime is often seen through, like many other things, unfortunately, through a political lens. Because the reality of it is such a complex and multifaceted issue that affects the Bahamian way of life, and everything that embodies being a Bahamian is impacted by it, the hopes and dreams of the Bahamian people. That young man, young woman, who has dreams of going off to pursue a college education and develop a life for themselves as they become adults. Visitors to our shores, the economics of the country. And so this is a moment for us, as the honorable member for East Grand Bahama said, it is truly a moment for us, Madam Speaker. And It is not a political issue, Madam Speaker. It is not. But the reality of it is that the discussion comes at the cross-section, understandably so, Madam Speaker, of our national politics. Why? Because, like any other issue in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, this body in here, both government and opposition, bears the responsibility of the expectations of the Bahamian people on bringing some resolution to the crime issue in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Madam Speaker. And that responsibility from opposition and government, though it is a dual responsibility and the responsibility of other stakeholders and citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the reality of it is that while we can be unified on the fact that we have a crime problem, unified in the belief that we need policies and programs and projects and legislation to deal with this issue, the truth is government has its role, the opposition has its role, that should be naturally expected from the Bahamian people. The citizens should have its role. The Royal Bahamas Police Force, civic organizations, churches, other faith-based organizations, everybody has a role to play. The leader of the opposition, in leading this caucus, has a duty to the Bahamian people, as we all do. He has a duty to the Bahamian people to elevate their concerns, to elevate the cries of the Bahamian people, and to ask and to plead on behalf of the Bahamian people to the government where it is understandable and justifiable for the government to act in a way that the Bahamian people expect the government to act. Does it negate any responsibility that we have as an opposition, members of parliament, or citizens of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas? Absolutely not. Now, to continue with my quest to ensure, as best as I can, that the Bahamian people see the sincerity of my words, I think it's important for me to say this. Over the many decades, the use of this issue as a political issue or in a political way, everyone has been guilty of that. So let's put that on the side, Madam Speaker. And sometimes in an unintentional way, I might say. But I do think, Madam Speaker, when it is said by some members of the government that all the leader of the opposition and the opposition is doing is playing politics, I think that statement in and of itself, in my humble view, is playing politics. Because the truth is, from the very first time, if I could use that phrase, in this particular parliamentary session, on the issues of crime, the member for Marco City, myself, and all of the other members of our caucus have said that crime is not a political issue, and that while you cannot blame the government, for a murder or somebody being robbed, there's an understandable expectation that the government must have a real and strong response to these issues. Why? Because they are the government of the day that controls many of the resources that's needed and the ability, Madam Speaker, very importantly, to bring all of the stakeholders together. Just as they would in their executive team, and they speak to the Minister of National Security, and they would speak to the Minister of Education to ask, What are your people seeing? How can we impact this problem through the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Social Services, the Ministry of National Security, the Ministry of Health? And then once you step back and broaden that, it is the government's responsibility to say, okay, everyone, in a real strategic and substantive way, this is how we are going about to deal with the issue of crime, inclusive of all of the stakeholders who are involved. On that note, Madam Speaker, we support the men and women of the Royal Bahamas Police Force and their efforts, and would they go out every day to secure this country and protect the lives of the Bahamian people. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that we all know a police officer or have a family member who either is on the police force or who've retired. I've had two, grandfather and uncle on the Royal Bahamas Police Force. I was this close to being a police officer. And so the point that I'm making, Madam Speaker, is that we know the great work and the sacrifices, Madam Speaker, that's made by the men and women of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. This is not just their problem or their issue while they're on the front line. And in many respects, commissioners of police, including the present commissioner of police, have asked for assistance in terms of legislation and changes that need to be made and criminal justice reform. They've asked this body over the decades to do some things. So, Madam Speaker, we have to do some things, Madam Speaker. We have to. Madam Speaker, you know, one time ago, I'm about old enough, still young, but old enough to remember, and obviously our country is changing, when, before you heard about some of these incidents that you hear today, you would hear about those things happening in the night. Those days are gone. You would never hear about something happening on Bay Street. That happened a couple years ago. One of the murders the other day happened on Lewis Street, steps away from the barracks. The other murder happened on Kwaku Street, steps away from the police station. Madam Speaker, in many ways, Madam Speaker, we should be ashamed. And I don't say it in any malicious way. The point is that some of these issues have been plaguing us for too long. Yes, it involves some candor and some straight talk and some honest talk, not only for us as politicians, but, I mean, parents. Parents. The other day, we had a wonderful conversation about thinking about old times, and you remember when. And though they were humorous in many ways, there was a profound point made relative to the experiences that many of us would have had. For example, one time ago, if your teacher disciplined you, and you talk about you going home to your parents to complain, man, your parents would ask you if you're crazy. They would ask you if you're crazy. Those things are changing. And I'm not talking about where parents have the right to ask teachers about legitimate concerns about their children. I'm not talking about those situations. I'm talking about just the fundamental issue of being disciplined, as all of us have been, whether in public or private schools, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the government has a responsibility to lead. Just how the government will stand up, or members would stand up, about progress made that they feel on any issue, progress made by any implementation of any policy, progress made relative to the strengthening of institutions. They should brag about it. They should. because we are here to make the Bahamian people's lives better. And as a part of the accounting of what we do, yes, we should say, since we've been in government, this has been done. Since we've been in government, this is the progress made on these issues. So it's no different on crime, Madam Speaker. It's a very challenging exercise for any government. So we get the political trepidation with it now, the political concern. That's the political concern. But it's definitely one where you can't worry about the political concern. At the end of the day, it is a complex issue that we all and that the government must lead on. There are many non-governmental organizations, associations, groups, who are doing things, very important work in our community. And we know them, and we applaud them wherever the government can assist in resources. That is done, and they need more help. But what we need more than anything, Madam Speaker, is to prevent the silos, because a lot of groups are doing their best operating in silos. We need one body to bring everybody together. Those who are doing work over there, and those who are doing work over there, and those who are doing work over there, and bring everybody together so it can connect. That's all we are saying that leadership of government, leadership in government, needs to do. That's what we've talked about, yes, and it's our job to also offer suggestions to be tweaked. No one has, monopoly on ideas. We've offered suggestions. We even haven't said that these are absolutely the best recommendations, but we intend to, the leader of the opposition has consistently said, we intend to be a part of the discussion, Madam Speaker. 17 murders, Madam Speaker. 17 murders. The question we have to ask ourselves, Madam Speaker, as we sit here and assemble here tonight, the question we have to ask ourselves very deeply is this: how do we ensure that the young man or young woman who left primary school earlier today, if we see some deviant behavior, and not all deviant behavior leads to criminal behavior, because I think at some point we all were could probably be categorized as doing some deviant things, because you go through the development as children. But the question is, that young man or young woman who's having an issue in primary school, how do we now assess that, see that, and stop that from getting to a young man or young woman with that mindset into high school now? And how do we stop that from getting you out of high school? And yet, that young man or young woman who now in his or her adult life gets into a criminal life, but the seeds of a criminal mind or embracing criminal behavior could be seen maybe early on, sadly, something beyond their control, because obviously at a young age, you're impressionable and so forth. That's the point. How do we develop a system to stop that young person, that child, from working their way, unfortunately, into a life that leads either to them being the suspect or, sadly so, them being the victim? That's the question for all of us, in my view, that we have to do. How do we stop that? And how do we create a system that along the way there are checks and balances? Because, Madam Speaker, if we don't, the Royal Bahamas Police Force has one of the greatest, I'm sure the minister, the minister would agree, has one of the greatest detection rates. Sorry? Sorry? Clear-up rates. Okay, so you enforce it and you clear up, right? There wouldn't be a prison big enough in the next 20, 30 years. We will be building a new prison every 30 years if we keep this up. To make us feel good, We have to focus on more preventative things, Madam Speaker. And it is not one answer, Madam Speaker. It's small, what may seem small, it's big, it's things we take for granted, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I played basketball from, I must be 7 years old. And you know why I thank God for that, Madam Speaker? Not only the fact that it gave me a college education and I went off on a scholarship, which was great for my parents' pockets. But from I was in what they call super mini playing basketball on the Blue Hills complex. That provided an outlet for me, Madam Speaker, provided an outlet for me. First of all, to channel my aggression and my competitiveness, you know, and my discipline. But also it allowed me to be, Madam Speaker, around other mentors, other teachers, who even when, Madam Speaker, and this is an important aspect of this, Madam Speaker, who even in their capacity, if they saw me going astray, they had the ability to say, Shanendon, let me talk to you. And it wasn't a basketball conversation. It was an issue about a young man does not think this way. A young man does not operate this way, Madam Speaker. So even with that right there, Madam Speaker, that experience, right? That isn't anything heavy with legislation. What that is about socializing and what really boils down to a community experience, Madam Speaker. A community experience. Madam Speaker, I've shared this story over the last few weeks relating to this same discussion with crime, Madam Speaker. But just again, emphasizing the importance of things we may take for granted. During my time in university playing college basketball, during the Thanksgiving break, I would go with my teammates. Because I wouldn't come back home. I would come back home during the Christmas and the summer. But the Thanksgiving break, I went with one of my teammates who was from Jamaica, New York. 3 o'clock in the morning, he woke me up, Madam Speaker. He said, Shanendon, get up, man. I said, what happened? He said, we're going to play ball. Now, of course, when you're playing ball, you always, but for me, I mean, I didn't know about playing ball 3 o'clock in the morning. So we went to a YMCA at 3 a.m. in the morning, and it was packed. Regulated. There were persons there running the YMCA. Young people, older people. And I asked him, I said, hey man, this is like this every morning? And he said, yeah. He said, you know something, because if they aren't in here, they would be out there on the blocks. Stuff like Midnight League, where the league literally starts at midnight to get people off the streets. Again, that by itself is not a panacea for all of our issues. The point is like Mama them would always say, idle hands. So we need to, as they say, bend the tree while it's young, not to suggesting that we aren't doing that in certain regards, but we have to do more of that because, again, we will only be building bigger prisons, Madam Speaker, and outside of service to country, we'll be needing more police officers, more police cars, draining the resources. Let's see if we could put some of those resources in preventative policies and projects and programs, Madam Speaker. But we need the government to bring everybody together and create a system, if you will, that allows for that young man or that young woman to have an experience in the first 20 years of their life that has them with a commitment to country, embrace discipline, embrace their man or their womanhood. All of these things, Madam Speaker, because the reality of it is we are reaching a point where it is too late. There is, I think it's going around social media, right? And every country is different, so I'm always careful, me personally, when people say, we need to be like Singapore and we need to be like, we need to be like the Commonwealth of the Bahamas in what we can be. We can always learn from other countries. So there's this article going around on social media that I think it's the Netherlands, closing prisons, right? They're closing prisons, right? And that's not a fantasy, right? Now they've been able to. This is not Netherlands. This is not Netherlands. The point I'm making is that at a minimum, what I'm saying, Madam Speaker, at a minimum, what I'm saying, Madam Speaker, I'm not suggesting. All I'm saying to you, Madam Speaker, is that the ability for us as a people, government, opposition, the population of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, the ability for us, Madam Speaker, to be able to bring the change. We hear all the time in here, Madam Speaker, all the time, and understandably, about the transformation done under this policy and that policy, whether it's the F&M in government or the PLP in government. PLP talks about certain institutions. My point is that we have the capacity in this country, Madam Speaker, by virtue of our history and what we've done as a collective. Forget the labels for a second. As a people, whether when we on that side or they on that side, as an example. And then outside of here, we are a great people who continue to do great things. There is nothing that the Bahamian people once they're focused on getting it done, there's nothing that they cannot achieve. This is something that we can do, Madam Speaker, and we owe it, Madam Speaker, to the next generations of Bahamians to make sure that we get it done. It involves everybody holding themselves into account. The government made promises during their campaign relative to crime. And they should have made those promises relative to crime. Because the Bahamian people, expected the government, they campaigned, they expected the government to fulfill campaign promises. And so the leader of the opposition is making sure that we are doing our duty on behalf of the Bahamian people, not only in here, but out there, Madam Speaker, And if the statement that the opposition is just playing politics wasn't politics, what could be said is, you know something, y'all have made some good contributions. You know, the opposition has made some good contributions. We feel that, you know, some of them we can, you know, strengthen, elaborate, but again, that's what the discussion needs to be, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I wrap up, Madam Speaker, and I went a little long on crime because it is something that, as anybody would expect, Madam Speaker, it's a major, major issue for us, Madam Speaker. I've gotten a number of concerns from reservists, member for Freetown, a number of reservists who have called to express that they received promotions, some of them 2 years ago, but they've not received the monies, a number of them. Right. Well, just bringing it to your attention. What's up, yes?
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
The part of the police budget that was shifted to the Ministry of National Security for some bizarre reason is the capital budget. That does not go to pay anyone's salaries or emoluments. The persons would be well placed to raise the issue with the Royal Bahamas Police Force Pay Office. The arrangements are to give the Commissioner of Police full independence. Their HR matters are processed in the Royal Bahamas Police Force HR office.
Yeah, but Madam Speaker, and all due respect, and I thank the member for, the member is the Minister of National Security. These are police reservists. So who better than to advocate and to agitate that this solution is reached other than the honourable member?
Part of the suggestion that was put in the document that they gave us on the 27th of March was to stay out of operational matters of the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Yeah. The Police Service Act says that that is the job solely of the Commissioner of Police. As we have said, I don't intend to interfere with the day-to-day operation of the Royal Bahamas Police Force as two ministers of the previous administration did. The matters that fall for our consideration at the ministry are solely, Madam Speaker, forwarding matters with regard retirements, pensions, and gratuities to the Ministry of the Public Service, and dealing with capital procurements for the police. You cannot have it both ways. You cannot have the Commissioner of Police solely charged with the administration of the police force and advocate interference by a minister of the central government.
Thank you, Honourable
Madam
Member.
Madam Speaker, the member for Freetown uses the word interference. Isn't this an issue of agents, officers who fall under his remit?
They don't.
They're officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, right? In the whole operations, aren't they a part of the national security apparatus of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas?
Madam Speaker,
Yeah.
St. Barnabas is the shadow Minister of National Security. He ought to know the Minister of National Security plays no part in the administration of it. And so, to be clear, they are not under the remit of the Ministry of National Security. I would advise, Madam Speaker, that they read the Police Service Act. The Minister of National Security plays no part in the promotion of contracted officers, gazetted officers, or the appointment of any policeman. Unfortunately or fortunately, the Police Service Act vests that authority in the Commissioner of Police and the Deputy Commissioner of Police. You really can't have it both ways.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, well, with all due respect to the member for Freetown, reserve officers of the Royal Bahamas Police Force, reservists, have explained and expressed that many of them have been promoted within the last 2 years, and they have not received their monies. And the Minister of National Security, and the Minister of National Security, and the Minister of National Security is saying, don't come his way? Come on, Madam Speaker, come on now. Come on now. That can't possibly register right with those reservists.
They're not under his remit.
No,
That's what you said, they're not under your
they're
remit.
not.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I am flabbergasted, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure many of those reserve police
Tell us
officers,
which cabinet ministers remit they under.
that the Minister of National Security is saying that reserve police officers do not come under his remit, Madam Speaker. That's mind-boggling. Madam Speaker, yeah, that's fine. Madam Speaker, on this particular bill, it has been said throughout the debate the importance of this bill to transparency, Madam Speaker, and the need to provide relief to the Bahamian people. And this was something that was put forward in 2017. A number of my colleagues on this side have offered suggestions and concerns, Madam Speaker, relative to certain parts of the bill. Madam Speaker, may I have one last? Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, the part of the bill that talks about the committee that is put together to appoint the person to fill that position, Madam Speaker. It has been expressed, and we are concerned that when it comes to removing that particular person, Madam Speaker, that it does not. It seems as though that the Prime Minister himself has more power that's needed, Madam Speaker, and we wish for the government to look at that portion and the possibility of amending that, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And St. Barnabas does support this bill.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes
If
the
I
honorable
may,
member for
I-
Freetown.
this is the body that makes law. If I can check who made this law, I do believe it was made in 2009. I do believe that was under a F&M administration. You in government 2009, tonight? Yeah. And so, Madam Speaker, it amazes me that as legislators, I'm trying to assist them because they seem flabbergasted by the provisions of Section 9 of the Police Service Act that says the commissioner of the commissioner shall have the command, superintendence, direction, and control of the police, of the force. It provides any number of provisions, and to seek to interfere with the commissioner's control of a disciplined force is an amazing thing that has caused two of their ministers to come in for condemnation, and we do not intend to repeat it. The helpful part to a policeman is if you have a complaint with the commissioner, you do not come and ask some politician to seek to override any power that is given to him. And I would finally, Madam Speaker, commend to their good reading the decisions of the Chief Magistrate of this country, the then Chief Magistrate, and the Court of Appeal. And that speaks for itself.
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank
The chair
you, Madam
recognizes
Speaker.
the honorable
Madam
member for
Speaker,
St. Barnabas.
we are not talking about, Madam Speaker, 2 days. We ain't talking about 2 months. The reserve police officers, the reservists are saying 2 years. 2 years, Madam Speaker. 2 years they ain't been paid. And the member for Freetown, I hear what he is saying about the legal interpretation on which he stands. And the member for Freetown, who is the Minister of National Security, is not saying on behalf of those officers, on behalf of the officers that we need in this crime fight, for example, that not even look into the matter, that it got to work its way through. Obviously, something is wrong if police officers haven't been paid in 2 years, not 2 days, not 2 months. Madam Speaker,
In the evening, and I don't want to belabor this, but when I say you're insulting to people, you're insulting to people.
you insulting the
What
officers.
what is said is that you have a commissioner of police, you have a deputy commissioner of police, you have assistant commissioner of police in charge of these matters, you have a pay office, and that somehow a politician who is given no power by any provision could go into the pay office of the police force that is presided over statutorily, constitutionally. And I know they don't respect the Constitution, but I do. And if the Constitution says this is a matter for the police, the persons who have come to me, I have helped them. I've told them that if you say they haven't paid you and they continue not to pay you, you ought to seek an action against them. And the curious thing about it, Madam Speaker, is guess what an ombudsman can do? An ombudsman can look at that, and that would not be improper. I repeat, Madam Speaker, I cannot, for the same reason the court says the current chairman of the F&M ought not to have been fooling with the police. And the previous Minister of National Security ought not to have been fooling with the police. And this minister will not meddle with them as Dr. Dwayne Sands did and my predecessor did.
Thank you, honorable member.
Madam Speaker,
Members,
Madam Speaker.
Last. We have to move on.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, that's all right. I'm making the point for the police reservists that have been calling me. All right? I'm making the point for the police reservists. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
He is not in here.
Madam Speaker. We're not talking about the member for Freetown using his position to ensure promotions and so forth for officers and how the whole human resources. We are talking about persons who are under his remit, who have not been paid for 2 years, Madam Speaker. 2 years. It's no different, Madam Speaker, in my view, if there's somebody in this House of Assembly that has not been paid. You can follow up on that for them. You ain't gonna say go to the cabinet office to find out what the deal is with your pay.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many, the chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Engliston.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of good people